are we living in a dystopia? But it's not even close. But we're gonna have to learn from history this time around. Um, like we've been here before, but it's worse, and we can still turn things around in America. But we must decide if we really want to do that. Now, the next world war has begun, or perhaps if you're a philosopher, you'll say ongoing existential conflict continues. Either way, on the annual Day of the Dead, celebrated as a joyous affirmation of life, no less, the world is a hot fucking mess. The hot side of that is visible in Ukraine, where Russia this week has doubled down on its threats of nuclear conflagration, sparking a New York Times report that senior Russian military officials have recently discussed how and when to use tactical nukes in the Ukrainian theater of war. Um, at the same time, North and South Korea have exchanged missile fire off each other's coastlines. North Korea stands accused of shipping weapons to Russia for the continuing war in Ukraine, and demonstrating how desperate Russia is becoming. Now, Iran is reportedly threatening Saudi Arabia, and China is threatening Taiwan. There is considerable unrest in Africa. There is an Ebola outbreak in Uganda. COVID concerns remain high across the globe, and scientists tell us that climate change has screwed us all. Inflation is a worldwide problem, largely because of the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Now, to top it all off, the largest oil companies are reporting record profits, and yes, I realize how many times I've had to write that sentence in my entire life. Of course, the ongoing Republican narrative in this country is that all of this is President Biden's fault, and what remains of the grand old party will solve that problem with cuts to Social Security and Medicare if they take over the House and Senate during the midterms, and that's it. That's their fucking solution. And by fucking God, they'll sure that they'll prevail, or at least they want us to believe that. But then it didn't happen. And if they didn't prevail, they'll scream election fraud and encourage more violence. Now, President Biden finally spoke out and firmly spoke, calling out Donald Trump and his maggot sycophants, a minority of the Republican Party, or so Biden has informed us, for the big lie. As for Trump specifically, Biden said that the former squatter had fanned the flames of sedition. He abused his power and put loyalty to himself above loyalty to his country, and it almost sounds like America is becoming a dystopia. And some are already believing that we are living in a dystopia, while others believe that we would be more like a Mad Max movie, or like the half-forgotten 1975 classic A Boy and His Dog. Now, those who dwell in the daily news of unrest may ask, what would you call these attacks against women, minorities, and people of different faiths, different sexual preferences, different religions, and different lifestyles? A minority by a minority that represents authoritarian interest and money, if not a dystopia. The morning newsfeed is not filled with tales of wonder so much as the tales of woe. We don't get news about settlements on the moon or Mars, or discoveries that enthrall the planet. Instead, our newsfeed makes us uncomfortable. Elon Musk brought out Twitter, and social media makes us even more uncomfortable. An evidently disturbed 42-year-old man breaks into Nancy Pelosi's house and beats her husband over the head with a hammer. And it isn't just an apparent assassination or a kidnapping attempt directed at the Speaker of the House, but an attack on sanity and democracy. What would you call a man physically attacking someone old enough to be his grandfather? The GOP has some shady sides, poor attempts at humor, and various conspiracy theories to explain this. And they want to fill you with fear and hatred while spreading their misinformation. Musk did no one any favors by bringing his tone-deaf analysis to Twitter. And yes, for many, the news is bad, and apparently it's going to get worse. Let's jump back to the year 1968. The year began. I've heard of this, but don't know about it too much. Let's jump back to 1968. The year began with the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. It was a significant setback for the U.S. military campaign. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy were both assassinated. The rise of Richard Nixon began shortly after. North Korea captured USS Pueblo. During an Olympics medal ceremony, Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fist in a silent demonstration against racial discrimination in the United States. Riots raged out in Washington, Chicago, New York, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Louisville, and Baltimore following the Martin Luther King assassination. I remember riot warnings being broadcast on radio and TV and warning us to stay inside. Um, as a child, you can only imagine a whirling, boiling mass of humanity whirling through the neighborhood like something from a Mad Magazine cartoon drawn by Jack Davis. The riots in Louisville, as it turned out, were exacerbated by misinformation about the civil rights activist Stokely Carmichael's planned visit. Um, in November of that same year, Star Trek aired the American television's first interracial kiss. The year ended with a greeting from the astronauts aboard Apollo 8, Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. as the crew became the first to travel to and orbit the moon. Now the moon is essentially gray with no color. Lovell said as he gave the first close-up description, "It looks like a plaster of Paris or sort of a grayish beach sand." All of those events occurred under the overreaching umbrella of the continuing threat of nuclear conflagration, as we speak of missile gaps in the arms race with the Soviet Union. Once a month at school, we conducted the duck and cover disaster missiles. It's an ominous sound. It's an ominous sounding siren blared, and every student dutifully files out the classroom in single file. Then we'd face the walls in the hallway, sit down, and put our heads between our legs, and that was supposed to protect us somehow or other from a Soviet nuclear bomb. Now every day seemed surreal. We talked constantly about the war in Vietnam, which people convinced that they would grow up to serve in and likely die in. People would eat their morning cereal, digging around for rub-off stickers from Yellow Submarine, while wondering if we'd ever see adulthood. Alan Hamburger, one of the most decent men that that somebody has ever worked with, remembered slogging through rice paddies that year while serving in Vietnam. He heard about Apollo 8, and remembering that he'd realized one night on patrol that he was using the moon to guide his movement through the jungle, and he realized there was quite a distance between here and there. Now, so by those standards, 2022 doesn't seem like a dystopia. It seems more of the same, brought to us in acutely painful fashion by the likes of Musk, who purchased Twitter at an inflated price to match his inflated ego so he can crow alongside the other robber barons who own media companies. And yes, social media has definitely helped spread that fear. Now, I've never heard of this book, but the person, Brian Kareem had said that he had wrote, or actually not wrote, let me see here where I just saw it at. When Brian Kareem was younger, he read a book by Isaac Asimov's science fiction classic called Foundation, and it warns violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. That sounds a lot like geopolitics today. It describes Putin in Ukraine. It describes Trump and his raging troglodyte incompetence, who use social media to try and terrify us into the submission that they cannot achieve with traditional media. They're like a cancer cell thriving in the unregulated dark places of human communication, and it's driving the need of power, raging insecurity, prolific ignorance, and the delusion that anyone who thinks differently is a threat to human existence or at least to their personal wealth. Now the madness is, this is madness, but it is the particular madness spread by the rich and the powerful to keep us fighting with each other while they continue to make bank, and we fall for it every fucking time. The rich have exploited the poor for far too long. I want that world to reach as many people as possible, so I have no problem using Twitter to criticize it. I have no problem selling books through Amazon that speak to the evils of concentrated media ownership. Basically, we're merely returning the exploitation that's delivered by the rich at the cost of the poor. And some may call it exploitation, but some like me would call it justice. Now pick your fucking poison. It's the most expedient way to get the word out. I won't leave Twitter and I won't avoid Amazon, but I also won't use either exclusively. Who knew that Facebook would eventually seem like the lesser social media evil? The media czars of today are nothing more than the robber barons of old. Single ownership of such a large concentration of content of content distribution must be regulated when the business is news, media content, and other forms of communication, especially information that's meant to educate or inform the public. Certain standards of service must be applied, or better yet, let's bust up the monopolies. We don't yet live in dystopia, but we are afflicted with the fear and insecurity that has raged inside the human heart and mind since we crawled out of the caves. Now today we are dealing with the long-standing problem that the Republicans would love you to believe, would love you to believe that were created by Biden, by Biden and his administration. I can't think of one of those problems that actually began under Biden's watch, like inflation, the war, climate problems, gas prices, anti-Semitism, or anything else. The roots run deep, and we have been forced to deal with these things over and over again because we refuse to learn from history. Donald Trump and his sycophantic minions in the Republican Party exploit these problems to their own ends precisely because we don't learn our lessons. John Kirby, the press spokesperson for the National Security Council, had said to reporters on Wednesday that we need to grasp the key issues. We asked him to outline the big picture when it comes to Republican claims about Biden's responsibilities for the current problems that we're facing. Now, reminiscent of Jason Robards and Parenthood, Kirby said that many of our problems have been with us for a long time, and we can never strike that football. And to keep up with that metaphor, we have to build teamwork and engage everyone, even our enemies, on issues we have in common whenever we can. Violence isn't the answer, but working together is the only solution, and Biden has sincerely tried to model that course of action. President Biden believes that no one nation can solve the world's problems, but Kirby explained, and he is pursuing opportunities of cooperation with many countries around the globe. Our founding fathers never had to deal with the specific complexities of today's world, but history has not taken us far away from the fundamental truths that we face, and we still face them today. Some people are fucking selfish. Some are scared, and some want to take food off your plate and put it on their own. Some of those people are in power, and quite a few of them shouldn't be. Building alliances and partnerships, even limited ones, according to Kirby, President Biden believes we can avoid the worst aspects of the dystopia that we're all fearing. We are less. We already had the midterm elections, and we saw how it played out. But once again, we voted. The U.S. remains the most viable option for forestalling dystopia. But if we can imagine to retain our democracy and show the rest of the world that a government of by and for the people can work against all odds and against the authoritarian leanings of the worst politicians. Now, for perhaps the last time in my lifetime, the choice is yours to make. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the about section of YouTube. And for just a little, as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.